They just continue. The franchise is said to be under liquidation as financial issues continue to haunt the beleaguered union. To tell us more about the goings-on down in PE, we are joined by SA Rugby analyst Thando Manana from Port Elizabeth, our studios down there. No stranger to Sports and Prime. Thando, welcome to the show. And tonight's, well, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, Thando. I know you're down there. There's been a lot of questions around the EP Kings, Eastern Province Rugby. What's the latest, my brother?
Look, I think first and foremost, good evening to you, Tabis, as well as the viewers out there. I think what's important is you've got to understand that tomorrow is the 10th of March. That's the date that was set in court after the two parties had sort of put down their heads of arguments with regard to the liquidation. JASOP is the lawyers for the players, and also the 19th applicant is SARPA, who also represent the players as well against the EP Kings. But I think what will happen down tomorrow, you might just see a change of plans in terms of what will happen in the courtroom tomorrow. You might also find that SARU might have to intervene. Remember, EP Rugby, it's a sole entity to the PTY. So therefore, they've on their own. SARU used to be a shareholder, no more. Yep. They're 100% the owners of that. So it becomes a problem now whereby if you were to look at the finances of the Eastern Province Rugby, it's less than 2 million. And I mean, the claim originally is 23 million from the players. That means that they've calculated up to 2017 what they would have earned under the contract that they had signed with Eastern Province Rugby Union. So things will be heated, but I think both parties, in terms of the respondent and the applicants, they will put their case down forward, and the judge will have to make up his mind whether to liquidate or to dismiss the liquidation. But also there are now talks that SARU might have to come in and saying, look, if SARPA speaks to the players, then what will happen is if they sort of say they will try and pay and have sort of, in terms of how they will make the payment back to the players, that will sort of be another way of coming out of this liquidation. But also, should the Union Eastern Province Rugby be liquidated, it would mean that there won't be any Currie Cup in this region this year going forward, because the union would be no more. And also, I think the liquidators, what they will get won't really reach to the sort of the claim that the players wanted, which was up to 18 million that they had calculated out of the 23 million that they originally wanted.
Yeah, Thando, we're looking at some of the pictures that we currently have on the screen as we're talking. Some of the players, EP Kings, back in Super Rugby this year. A lot was expected of them. I mean, great excitement, seeing them run out over the past week or so. And now you mentioned something quite sad, the fact that there could not even be a Currie Cup team. Surely this is not going down with the lovers of the game in that region.
Yeah, but also you've got to remember that the Southern Kings now are solely owned by SARU, meaning that nothing will affect them. What will affect is the players that didn't get the contracts to be part of the Southern Kings. But also those that did get a contract with the Southern Kings have also, one of the applicants also for tomorrow's liquidation. So it's not about that those that have made the Southern Kings squad won't be able to also benefit from the liquidation should something do come out. What it just says is the amateur will be affected. The amateur being Eastern Province Rugby now, that is a team that they will put down for the Currie Cup. They won't be performing because they fall under the Eastern Province Amateur League and PTY. But the Southern Kings is owned solely by SARU. Therefore, the players are getting money, those who got contracts. Yeah. But I also feel that, this thing has been coming for a long time. I mean, if you wanted to liquidate, or if EP Rugby knew that they were having financial problems, they should have applied in the court of law early on, because they knew that they've got to pay the employees, they've got to pay everyone that is part of their payroll. Unfortunately, they didn't do that because of promises. Remember, there was the 200 million, which was supposed to be the biggest sponsor to have ever taken over in South Africa, that Mr. Watson, the president, announced earlier on. That 200 million never came to the fore. There were reports that he'd gone to Australia to finalize the deal with a mining company in Australia, only to find out that he had gone down with his wife to a wedding. So those things, they come back, and finally had to give in. And by giving in, it meant that he gave over SARU, the Super Rugby franchise, to run it. And obviously the others are still there, which is the EP Amateur, and also the vote of no confidence. For the third time, he's still facing that. So there's a lot of oohs and ahs happening here. It's not good for the surroundings of EP Rugby as well as the clubs. I think what needs to happen is the intervention should come from SARU to say that as the mother body, because they've been asked in the last vote of no confidence meeting, which because of a technicality it never happened before. They've been asked by the clubs to bring in an administrator and to run this union. Based on that, you could find tomorrow in court that that could work for EP Rugby, because the clubs have asked for the administrator to come in from SARU, and for SARU then to say, right, we can take over, but the players speak to SARPA, which is the representative of the players, to discuss on how, or in terms of how they will make payments to those players, come find a sort of out-of-court settlement to pay those players so that for them to take over. What happens to the executive under Chicky Watson, it remains to be seen for that vote of no confidence, but things now are purely not for him, surely against him at this stage or in this nature.
Thando, let's wrap it up. We're going to run out of time. Robbie Kenson has just been announced as well, the EP Rugby's coach come Currie Cup. Obviously, there's a lot of change that we're speaking of right now, the possibility that Chick Watson might not be there. Let's look ahead now. The next, how many days are we looking at? The next week, the next month?
Yeah, it starts on the 9th. It starts on the 9th. It starts on the 9th, the Currie Cup. But also Robbie Kempson.
Thando, I'm saying, when we look forward to EP Rugby, when should we say maybe they would have survived the so-called proverbial storm? Is it a week, a month? Because it basically looks bleak.
Yeah, it looks very bleak. I tell you one thing, Robbie Fleck, you must remember, is under the payroll of SARU. He's the head of the academy down in Eastern Province. So therefore, that's another ploy. Because if it's a Currie Cup, maybe SARU has instructed him to take over as a Currie Cup coach, because he's part of the payroll of SARU. There are a lot of things. But remember also, the motherboard has been mum about so many issues in South African rugby history that I would not be myself surprised that this is an agreement that SARU has come up with Robbie Kempson. Even myself, I haven't had a chat with him to ask really what is really happening, but I'll have an opportunity surely. But also, just from my side, I would say that Robbie Kempson, his salary comes, he's on the payroll of SARU, so for him to take over, that's a great decision from SARU himself. Whether that is sort of now, you'll find it's going to be deja vu for me, that not to think in a sense that I think SARU tomorrow will try to intervene to make sure that SARU, Eastern Province Rugby doesn't become liquidated. Remember, this is the second oldest rugby union in the country, so that history will go down. And for the assets for them to sell, if it does get liquidated, it won't be even more than 2 million in terms of that. Remember, the stadium belongs to the municipality, so a third party cannot be liquidated, which is the stadium cannot be sold to cover those costs. And also the Buti Rasma Stadium also was the municipality ground, so they cannot also try and sell that piece of land down in Summerstrand.
Yeah, well, Thando Manana, SABC analyst, rugby analyst, part of the room dividers. There's 3 of you, yes?
Yeah, there's 3 of us.
Well, thank you very much,
Thando. 3, but yeah, thanks very much, T. Enjoy the evening.
Thank you very much, Thando. Thando Manana speaking to us from Port Elizabeth Studios in connection with the possible liquidation of EP Rugby. That is tomorrow. We'll try and catch up with him tomorrow. Simon Berger will definitely give you the latest in as far as that's concerned. We'll quickly move on, with football.